Something is wrong with how we're led, and you already know it, not as a political opinion, as a feeling, a deep, persistent sense that the people in charge, in government, in corporations, in institutions, shouldn't be, that the way power works is somehow broken at a level that transcends party, ideology, and country. Most people chalk this up to cynicism, to living in a fallen age, to the eternal complaint that leaders aren't what they used to be. But what if it's not cynicism at all? What if it's biology? Your brain was shaped by roughly 300,000 years of human social life. And for approximately 290,000 of those years, we lived under a leadership model so different from the one we have now that your nervous system literally doesn't recognize the current arrangement as legitimate. 97% of human history, one operating system, then a hard switch to another, with no software update. In 2001, the anthropologist Joseph Henrich and his colleague Francisco Gil White published a paper that should have changed how every person on Earth thinks about power. They identified two completely separate psychological systems for following leaders. The first is prestige. You follow someone because you admire them, because they demonstrate skill, knowledge, or wisdom that you want access to. You give them status freely, and you can take it back at any time. Nobody forces you. The second is dominance. You follow someone because they can hurt you, because they control resources you need or threaten consequences you can't afford. You give them compliance, not admiration. And you can't easily leave. These aren't metaphors. They're distinct neural pathways. Different brain regions activate depending on whether you're following a prestige leader or a dominance leader. Your brain knows the difference, even when your conscious mind doesn't. Here's the problem. The system your brain was calibrated for, the one that feels right, that generates loyalty and cooperation and genuine respect, is prestige, and the system you've spent your entire life living under is dominance, that persistent sense that something is wrong. That's not pessimism. That's a 300,000-year-old operating system trying to tell you that the current arrangement is a violation of your own evolutionary design. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to what we actually evolved under. And what the anthropologists found there is more radical than any political theory ever proposed. In the 1980s, the primatologist Robert Sapolsky was studying a troop of baboons in Kenya when something unexpected happened. The troop had a rigid dominance hierarchy, the biggest, most aggressive males at the top, bullying everyone beneath them, standard primate politics. Then a tuberculosis outbreak hit a garbage dump near the troop's territory. The dominant males, who were aggressive enough to fight for access to the dump's food, were the ones who got sick and died. What happened next changed Sapolsky's understanding of primate behavior. The surviving troop, now composed mostly of females and less aggressive males, didn't replace the old hierarchy. They developed a new social structure, more affiliative, more grooming, less aggression, more cooperative. And here's the part that stunned the researchers. When new males joined the troop from outside, males who had been raised in normal, aggressive troops, they adopted the new culture within months. The peaceful structure wasn't genetic. It was transmitted. It persisted for over 2 decades. The dominance model is not inevitable, even in baboons. Remove the conditions that enforce it, and something else emerges. Something that looks a lot more like what Bohm found in hunter-gatherer bands, and it's happening in human organizations right now. Though most people involved don't realize what they're actually doing. When a tech startup adopts a flat hierarchy, they're groping back toward prestige-based leadership. When a company implements servant leadership, where the leader's job is to remove obstacles for the team, not to command them, they're accidentally recreating the hunter-gatherer model. When open-source communities organize around contribution and reputation rather than titles and authority, they're building reverse dominance hierarchies. The best code wins, not the loudest voice. The entire language of modern leadership theory is accidentally evolutionary. Psychological safety, distributed authority, leading by example, earning respect rather than demanding it. Every one of these concepts is a rediscovery of something your ancestors practiced for 300,000 years. But here's the tension, and it's real. These experiments keep failing at scale. Flat startups add hierarchy as they grow. Democratic movements consolidate into parties with bosses. Revolutions against tyranny produce new tyrants. The pattern is relentless. Because the problem was never moral. It was structural. Prestige-based leadership evolved for groups of 150. We now live in nations of millions. No one has yet solved the engineering problem of scaling prestige governance past Dunbar's number without it collapsing into dominance. Athens couldn't solve it. Rome couldn't solve it. The American founders couldn't solve it, though they tried harder than most. The internet was supposed to solve it. It hasn't. Not yet. But naming the problem is the first step. And this is what almost nobody is telling you. The system you live under is not the human default. It's a 10,000-year-old experiment that your neurobiology has never accepted. The discomfort you feel isn't dysfunction. It's your operating system recognizing an incompatible environment. Every tradition we've explored on this channel, the shamanic lineages, the esoteric schools, the mystery traditions, the inner technologies, all of them are fragments of the prestige-based world. Knowledge transmitted freely by those who earned the right to teach. Authority conferred by demonstrated transformation, not inherited power. The alchemists working in secret. The Sufis encoding their techniques in poetry. The Taoists writing political manuals disguised as mysticism. All of them were operating prestige-based knowledge systems inside a dominance-based world, keeping the old model alive in the cracks of the new one. 300,000 years of one way, 10,000 years of another, and a brain that still remembers which one felt right. If this journey into the evolutionary roots of leadership resonated with you, subscribe to Consciousness Cartography. We're mapping the traditions that shaped human consciousness in ways most people never learn. Next, we'll explore Theosophy, the woman who invented modern occultism and the movement the establishment tried to destroy. The map continues. Around 12,000 years ago, humans in the Fertile Crescent figured out how to farm. The Neolithic Revolution, the single most consequential event in the history of our species, and possibly the worst thing that ever happened to us. Hunter-gatherer life had a built-in feature that made dominance almost impossible: mobility. If a leader became intolerable, you could leave, walk away, join another band. The exit option was the ultimate check on power. Agriculture destroyed the exit option. When you plant grain, you're anchored. You can't leave your fields. Your surplus is stored in one place. And stored surplus is the first thing in human history that can be hoarded, controlled, and defended. The anthropologist James C. Scott argues in Against the Grain that early states weren't formed by willing citizens coming together for mutual benefit. They were formed by elites who figured out that grain, unlike hunted meat or gathered plants, could be counted, taxed, and confiscated. It was the first controllable resource. Surplus creates inequality. Inequality creates the need to defend the surplus. Defending the surplus requires enforcers. And enforcers require a new kind of leader. Not someone the group chose, someone the surplus chose. This is the birth of dominance-based leadership. Not an ideology, not a philosophy. A logistical consequence of grain storage. And then the transitional forms appeared. The first god-kings of Mesopotamia and Egypt represent something that had never existed before in human history. A hybrid, prestige and dominance fused into a single figure. The pharaoh wasn't just a warlord with a bigger army. He was a living god, the intermediary between the human world and the divine. He held prestige, religious authority, cosmic significance, the kind of awe that triggers the admiration circuits in the brain. And he held dominance. Armies, taxation, the power to enslave and execute. This was the mutation, the chimera, and it won. Because here's what the God-King model exploits. Your brain has both circuits, prestige and dominance. And when someone activates them simultaneously, when they make you genuinely admire them while also making you afraid of them, the result is a kind of obedience that feels voluntary. Every monarchy, every empire, every authoritarian system since is a descendant of this hybrid. The divine right of kings, the personality cults of dictators, the CEO who is both visionary genius and ruthless terminator. All of them are running the same exploit on the same two circuits in your brain. But the old model didn't die. It kept trying to come back. Athens, around 500 BCE. For roughly 150 years, the Athenians ran an experiment in trying to restore distributed, prestige-based leadership at a scale that had never been attempted. Direct democracy. Citizens argued and voted in person. Leaders were selected by lottery, not election. Because the Athenians understood something we've forgotten. Elections select for dominance. The person willing to campaign hardest, to promise the most, to perform confidence most convincingly, is precisely the person the hunter-gatherer band would have assassinated. The Athenian experiment half worked. It was brilliant and flawed and temporary. It couldn't solve the scale problem. Dunbar's number doesn't stretch to 40,000 voting citizens, then Rome. The Republic to Empire transition, playing out in real time over 2 centuries. The most documented example in history of prestige-based governance collapsing into dominance-based rule. The Senate eroded, the generals accumulated. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Augustus kept the language of the Republic while building an autocracy. The pattern is always the same. Prestige systems emerge. They work. They can't scale past Dunbar's number without modification. Dominant systems exploit the gap. The hybrid takes hold. And your brain, built for the first system, spends the rest of history feeling like something is wrong. In 1999, the anthropologist Christopher Boehm published a book that quietly detonated everything most people assume about human nature. It was called Hierarchy in the Forest. And its central finding was this. For the vast majority of human existence, our ancestors didn't just lack dominant leaders. They actively and systematically destroyed anyone who tried to become one. Boehm studied dozens of hunter-gatherer societies across every inhabited continent, and the pattern was universal. When an individual attempted to dominate the group, to hoard resources, to boss people around, to claim authority they hadn't earned, the group responded. First, gossip, the most ancient political technology on Earth. Dismantle someone's reputation before their power consolidates. Then ridicule, public mockery. Cut the would-be tyrant back down to size. Then ostracism, exclusion from the group. In a world where isolation meant death, this was devastating. And in extreme cases, assassination. Boehm documented case after case across unrelated cultures on different continents. A hunter who became too aggressive, too controlling, too dominant, would simply be killed by a coalition of the others. This wasn't anarchy, it was the opposite. Boehm called it a reverse dominance hierarchy. The group collectively dominated any individual who tried to dominate the group. Egalitarianism wasn't passive, it was enforced. It was a political technology as sophisticated as anything we've invented since. And within these bands, leadership still existed. But it looked nothing like what we'd recognize today. The leader of a hunter-gatherer band was typically the person who demonstrated the most skill, the most generosity, the most wisdom in a particular domain. The best tracker led the hunt. The person with the deepest knowledge of plants led the gathering. The individual with the strongest connection to the spirit world, the shaman, guided the group's relationship with forces they couldn't see. And here's what's crucial. None of these leaders had coercive power. They couldn't force anyone to do anything. Their authority lasted exactly as long as the group found it useful. The moment they overreached, the gossip started. Robin Dunbar's research tells us why this worked. The human brain can maintain stable social relationships with roughly 150 people. Dunbar's number. In groups this size, everyone knows everyone. Reputation is visible. Free riders get caught, and leaders are accountable because every member of the group can see them, judge them, and withdraw support. This is what your brain was built for. Leadership you chose. Authority that was earned through demonstration and maintained through service. Power that could be revoked the moment it stopped serving the group. And if this sounds familiar, it should. In our Taoism episode, we explored Huang Lao, the governing philosophy that said the best leader is one the people barely know exists. Govern a great state as you would cook a small fish. Don't overhandle it. The Taoists weren't inventing a philosophy. They were remembering one, describing in literary form the leadership model that had governed human life for 300,000 years before the first city was ever built. So what changed? What broke this system? The answer is grain.